But Hannah's family has prevented them from taking things any further.
It hasn't been the smoothest road with her family accepting me as being an outsider.
He's hoping his DNA will smooth things out.
Maybe our ancestors' paths crossed along the way somewhere. Who knows? I don't know if it'll get me very far, but I could use it, yeah.
Whatever their source of discontent, both Alma and Eamon may soon draw deep inspiration from their genetic results. They are both carrying on an artist tradition, begun by their ancestors in the caves of Europe tens of thousands of years ago. It so happens that some of the very markers that bind Europeans like George, Eamon, and Alma to these old world artists can also be found in the New World as well, in people like Michelle de Jesus. Her ancestors set foot in the Americas as early as 20,000 years ago, way before Columbus. Growing up a New Yorker with Puerto Rican roots caused a bit of an identity crisis for Michelle de Jesus and her sister Myrna.
I really want to try to go to PR for Christmas, surprise the folks. As a New Yorican, when we'd go to Puerto Rico in the summertime, my cousins would sometimes tease us. It was just kind of like, well, she's gringa. She's from over there.
A fourth grade teacher and part-time professor who teaches a course on diversity, Michelle embraces her heritage. And like so many others, wants to preserve it.
My great-grandfather was Puerto Rican, and his parents were Puerto Rican, and so on and so forth. So as far as I know, we've always been Puerto Rican. And I feel connected to that. And when I look in the mirror, I see that. And I see my grandmother and my great-grandmother. It's something that I cherish, and it's something that I am very protective of.
Michelle, now in training for the New York Marathon, has much to cherish. Like many other Latin Americans, her ancestors were among the very first people to settle this continent, among the very first Americans. To understand how they got there, we have to rewind back 40,000 years to Central Asia, where Michelle's ancestors and those of Dave Reed were one and the same. While Dave's took the M173 west towards Europe, Michelle's mitochondrial B marker headed east. Over tens of thousands of years, B and other markers like A, C, D, X, and Y chromosome M242 were the first to settle much of Eastern Asia. Our Thai chef Gringrai's ancestors were among them. But about 20,000 years ago, some of these people began ranging farther than humans ever had before.
You start running and you think, oh, 3 miles is impossible. And then you do 3 miles easily, and then you do 6 miles, and 10, and 13, and you keep going and going. And it's really amazing how far you can push yourself.
We can't be sure what pushed Michelle's ancestors, migrating game or population pressures perhaps, but something compelled them to face some of the harshest conditions on Earth.
The driving pump there is the cold, and it's at that moment that this population gets lucky. They didn't know that one day the climate was going to get them into the Americas, but that's what happened.
18,000 years ago, with the Ice Age at its most extreme, ice sheets several kilometers thick covered northern Eurasia and America. With water frozen at the poles, ocean levels dropped some 300 feet. People struggling to eke out a living in this harsh tundra could wander over land from Russia to the Americas and not even know it.
And so these people would have been migrating back and forth, living a life that was basically between two continents. At some point, a gap would have opened up in the ice sheets in North America, and it would have allowed a few of these people through into the Americas, including Michelle's ancestors.
Today, a hot debate in science is exactly when those ancestors crossed. For decades, the New World's earliest archaeological evidence, 13,500-year-old spear points found first in Clovis, New Mexico, and later in George Dellis's study, suggests humans didn't cross the Bering Land Bridge until about 14,000 years ago, at the earliest.
There you go, a couple Clovis points. These are the people that are in dispute. When did they come to this continent? Are they here 14,000 years? Are they here 40,000 years ago?
DNA, like Michelle's, may fill in some gaps. Her Native American markers are found throughout the Americas, but their beginnings date back to Asia, around 18,000 years ago.
It originated in Asia and moved into the Americas after that, after 18,000 years ago. So we say, with our error bars, between 15 and 20,000 years ago, people made this migration.
That's at least 1,000 years before Clovis, a date the latest archaeological evidence is helping to confirm. At Paisley Cave in south central Oregon, archaeologist Dennis Jenkins of the University of Oregon has discovered some rather unconventional human artifacts.
We were looking and hoping, of course, to find spear points, evidence of their technology. Instead, what we found was the perfect human signature.
It's called a coprolite, and it is exactly what it looks like. A fossilized poop sample left behind by our fellow man or woman about 14,400 years ago.
There are both plant materials as well as animal materials, but it's the DNA that we found and identified as human that ultimately identifies this particular specimen.
Jenkins and his team have read that DNA, and it turns out to match many Native American markers today, including that mitochondrial B marker, which is being carried around by Michelle de Jesus. Together with other artifacts like bone and animal remains, the Oregon findings indicate Michelle's ancestors were living a fruitful existence in the Americas, much earlier than Clovis points would have us believe. But if we look even further south, about as far south as we can go, we find we might have arrived even earlier. At a dig site in Monteverde, Chile, traces of seaweed stuck to the blades of stone tools suggest people were already living near the bottom of South America 14,000 years ago. The site, 35 miles east of the Pacific, reveals that early Americans exploited coastal resources, like seaweed for food and medicine, fueling the argument that the route from Alaska into the Americas wasn't inland, but along the coast. Either way, Monteverde is widely accepted to be the oldest site in the entire New World. The finish line for the longest run